Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Weighing In Podcast. I'm joined today by my good friend. We've been friends for, she's been 20 something years now, I believe. 23, 24 years,
I
something like
lost
that.
track.
So, and bet you did. Oh, man. It's probably been a long 23, 24 years for you, buddy, being my friend. I'd like to share all the great moments, but, we just don't have
No,
time.
no, no, that's a
Don't have
whole
time.
separate series, but still here, buddy.
Yeah.
Still taking your
Yep.
calls,
Still
still
here.
hanging out. Here we are.
I get a bad rap, man. I wish people could really understand how great I am. Go ahead, just gas me up just a little bit before we get started. Go
I,
ahead,
I
gas me up.
can't, bro. I'm sorry. I'm
All right,
sorry.
all right, all
I'm
right. That's
sorry.
enough.
No,
That's
but
enough. That's enough.
you're all right. That's all I'll say. Guys, he's all right. He's all right. Don't believe everything you hear. Not everything, but he's all right.
Yeah, been friends for a long time, so you've dealt with a lot of my stuff, but even in the fight world, not many not many people know. Like you were with Rumble and the Rock, with when BJ was with them and JD and those guys, and they launched that promotion, and then Elite XC, I believe, bought them. Is that correct?
Yeah, there was a deal done that brought us in to help launch Elite XC and gave them the rights to all the footage. And yeah, there was a deal done. So they didn't outright buy it, but there was a deal at that time in place to bring us in to help. Like we were the first guys in there to help
Mhm.
launch that organization.
And then with Elite XC, like, yeah, sorry, I didn't fully introduce you, Rich
Yeah,
Chow, ladies and gentlemen, and didn't I just said Rich? That's just our relationship. It's been this many years, but like I said, you had so much input into the sport. You've done so much work in terms of matchmaking for Strikeforce and Elite XC and Bellator, and then also to managing athletes now is what you do was what you're doing, along with some other things, and this this whole thing with how CBS and how Paramount has now taken over with the UFC in terms of their TV rights. I just wanted to kind of get your feeling because, like you said, you kind of helped organize or been part of that from the beginning with Elite XC and then the Strikeforce days. I feel like we just started right. We're right back where we could have been. I think. Do you look back and go, "Damn, we had that right there. It was there for both
yeah,
promotions."
absolutely. To take it all the way back, early 2000s. It launched first on Showtime. Elite XC was the first
Yeah.
promotion. Was actually from what I recall the first MMA promotion on premium cable. I mean, back then you had Showtime, HBO was still around, and I guess a few smaller cable companies. But yeah, it was the first time MMA was placed on premium cable. And then after a few events, it led up to the first CBS show.
Mm. And then with the CBS show, I mean, you guys did monster numbers with that first CBS event, correct? And then that was a good segue into doing more shows on the CBS platform. And then can you kind of run us through kind of what happened and how that all kind of fell
Yeah, for
apart?
sure. So yeah, as you said, that first CBS event was big, was huge. Kimbo, James Thompson from Newark, New Jersey, had a couple other good fights on that card. But that was the one. That was the main attraction.
Mm-hmm.
Kimbo was at the peak of his popularity, and so he was just instant ratings. He was must watch TV, and it also put us in a position where I think when everybody saw the numbers, they all loved the numbers. I think they had their concerns
Yeah.
about the sport and didn't understand it entirely, but man, they love the numbers, right? When you come out of the gate and have numbers like that, it got everyone excited over there.
What were like I've heard a lot of arguments because even I've said I think it was around 9 million views, correct? Am I or was it
At
more
its
than that?
peak, I believe it was around there at its peak. It was a very very high number, a number that again made everybody happy. But I would say
Mhm.
from eight or nine, I know that's a big difference, but it was around there. Again, there's so many different ways to slice and dice these numbers, right? To
Yeah.
to get you what you need and what you want. But yeah, I think that's fair. And of course, everybody was talking about it. It was a very big deal and a really really great moment,
Mhm.
and then everything just kind of became a lot more difficult from that point on.
Do you like? Do you look back? Because obviously, then that happened. I believe it was in Nashville, correct? With the Mayhem Miller and Nick Diaz. Was that
Yeah,
in
that was,
Nashville?
and that takes us over to the
Yeah,
Strikeforce days. There were still a few
yeah.
more CBS events on Elite XC, and then also one prior in Strikeforce. Remember, Fedor
Okay.
Rogers was the first from
Yes.
Chicago, so that was before the Nashville event.
Yeah, that was a Strikeforce
Correct. Yeah,
event
that
though,
was
correct?
Strikeforce.
Because you said there was a couple CBS ones first, and the Strikeforce one was Fedor and Rogers, huge knockout, and it was like one of those like, oh, Rogers doesn't have a chance, and it was making a little bit of a fight in that fight, and then all of a sudden, boom, big overhand right lands, and Rogers goes out. And then moving into Nashville, you take a look, and how do you think things would have been different though? I mean, had the whole Nashville event just finished the way it should have finished, and we moved on?
Um,
I mean, were they happy? Was CBS happy with everything that was going on? Obviously, still a little skeptical of the sport and all the human cockfighting and all the other stuff that was talked about back then. But were they happy with the numbers and happy with the sport and happy with the way things were going? And then
yeah,
that
yeah,
happened.
I think they were happy. Fedor did well. Fedor on CBS did well. They really got behind it. They being CBS, and you could really feel the excitement. Um, and they were showing us a lot of love, so that went well, and that it really went well going into that event in Nashville. We go out and Coker cuts a really great deal and makes some moves to bring Dan Henderson over, which was a very big deal at the
Yeah,
time. And yeah, it
yeah, it
was
was
huge.
huge.
And so there was a lot of excitement and momentum leading into that event in Nashville.
Yeah.
Uh, Unfortunately, the fights just didn't, play out. Like on paper, they were great. If I remember correctly, it was Gill versus Aoki. It
Hmm.
was Mo versus Musasi. And then you had Jake and Dan Henderson. So on
Yeah,
paper, at that time, man, it's like, whoa, everyone was excited. It was a big card. And then the fights just, I believe they were all decisions, right? It didn't play out. It
yeah.
didn't play out the way fans wanted to. They weren't these exciting barn burners. They were just they were very well matched. They were just very strategic fights where
Mhm.
guys did what they had to do to get their hand raised. And at the end of the day, as you know,
Yeah,
that doesn't always mean it's going to be an exciting fight.
yeah. That doesn't translate to exciting fights for the
No,
fans. Guys are out there making business decisions and not out there fighting with they're fighting with their hearts, but it's just their business. They're making a business. They're fighting
yeah,
also with
I
their
got to
wallets,
win.
making sure that the
Yeah,
money's
I got
coming
to
in.
win. And I remember that after the show, immediately after the show, Dan loses a decision to Jake, and they're doing the post fight interviews, and I start walking out of the cage with Bob. So
Mm.
crazy Bob and I are like walking out, and you could tell the energy wasn't there. The fights didn't live up to
Mhm.
the hype. They weren't the most exciting, and I remember saying to Bob like, "Well, glad that's over." Right. And then next thing you know, that brawl breaks out. We hear all this noise, and Bob
Yeah,
and I turn around and we got to run back to the cage and get in there and start to break that whole thing up. And,
yeah.
after that moment, there was a long break. There was a little timeout. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Those are those moments where, like, you wish in history of the sport because I think it would have changed the outcome of how whether Strikeforce was sold and whether it was. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn. Maybe it's not the case. It just felt like it was definitely held them back from growing any further because they had such a huge platform to fight on. All the fighters had to promote Strikeforce, and it just went away right after that. Like you said, a long break, and it just never was the same. The relationship felt like it was tarnished
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah. We got put on timeout. MMA as a whole got put on timeout. They weren't happy. And I could understand why they,
Yeah,
they were not happy at all. And I remember that night very well, the aftermath. And we knew, like, you could feel it. Like, this ain't good. This is not
yeah,
good. And then the ratings, didn't really justify. Like you hoped. Well, if we get a killer number, perhaps that'll help us survive this thing and get through it. And then the numbers, because the fights again weren't exciting, and that main event,
Yeah.
if you recall, Dan drops him early on, and credit to Jake. Jake gets knocked out. I remember watching it cage side and seeing Jake's head hit the canvas, and he wakes up and then immediately gets a
Mhm.
takedown. And Dan had a really
Yeah.
rough weight cut, a really bad one. It drained him, it zapped him. And look, no, not taking anything away from Jake. Jake did his thing.
No.
Credit to him. Um, and then Jake proceeded to just dominate the fight. And so
Yeah. After round one, it was a complete just same rinse,
yeah,
wash, repeat
yeah.
after that.
Dan was zapped. He was that weight cut killed him. He was completely uh, out of energy. And then Jake just went to work. And I want to say it was just such dominant positions, like just mount for like several minutes, but couldn't finish them because Dan's tough and savvy enough to not get submitted, on the ground. And so you just had just positional, win. And as we said, sometimes those aren't, what fans want to see. So yeah, ratings weren't fantastic. And then that puts you, in a bad spot where you're like, man, if the number is good, maybe we can get some forgiveness here. But clearly things just didn't line up. And you're right. Who knows what could have happened if things, if that moment doesn't happen, if that night doesn't take a turn for the worst, who knows?
Yeah. Like what's wild is that happens, right? On CBS, and the sport has changed so much. It's been so much different since then. Based on look at like Habib jumps the cage, jumps into the crowd. I mean, we just saw Dylan Dennis, fighting in the stands. We've had history. Conor McGregor throws a dolly through a bus window, and some fighters get hurt with glass. It's it's actually only helped the UFC grow. But you have with an event like with Strikeforce in that Nashville show, it pretty much, I wouldn't say killed the promotion, but it definitely held it back quite a bit. And what has changed though? Like how is that? What has changed in our sport that is allowed, not allowed, but has we feed off of this type of stuff now? Whereas back then it was like, no, 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 this is not good. This is really
Yeah, I
bad.
think it was just very early on. Obviously, the sport had existed for a long time up until then, but for a lot of these executives and networks, it was a very new thing. I mean, I'll tell you, even going back to Elite XC, I remember we were doing a show. Um, I want to say we were in Stockton. We did a CBS event there. Nick fought, Thomas Denny, Jake Shields fought, Nick
Mm-hmm.
Thompson. It was Robbie versus Scott Smith rematch. And
Mm,
there was another fight on that card. It was really fun. It was a great fight, and
yeah,
a bunch of great fights on the main card, all finishes, all exciting. And I remember when we were transitioning from the prelims into the main card, there was always that little bit of a break, right?
yeah.
And just being on the headset at that time and just hearing people freaking out, like, can we change the canvas right now? Because there was blood on it from the prelims. Like that's how people were thinking back
Yeah,
then, right? Like, do we have enough time? Is
yeah.
there an extra canvas to swap out? Can we change the mat? We can't be going on CBS with blood all over the mat. I mean, that's how it was at that time. Just to kind of give
Yeah.
you another example of how far we've come, right? From worried about that and some other things to now, I think people understand crazy things will happen in this sport. And oftentimes, man, you just got to be in a position to capitalize on it, right? It just makes it all bigger. Um, if obviously, if it's not that egregious, if it's not that crazy and doesn't cross the line too much, but guys fighting each other, getting into it, right? These
Mhm.
feuds, I think people started to see like, wait a minute, this just leads to more ratings, more pay-per-views, more tickets. So if we can kind of control it at a certain level and promote that, you know, I think we can all benefit off of it. Now, again, it took a while. It took years for people to get comfortable with
Mhm.
it. I mean, people fighting in a cage and bleeding again back then was still hard for people to accept.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I'm sure they're all pretty relaxed and it's not this crazy image that it once was.
Yeah, it's wild how people just didn't seem to understand. Like, you put a bunch of fighters in an arena, right? Some are not going to like each other, and when a fight breaks out, you're surprised. Like, this. I mean, I know they're supposed to break out inside the cage, but you put a bunch of them that are in the stands or in the arena or outside the arena, and when somebody decides to get into a fight, they all act shocked. And I'm like, no, this is what they do. This is how they. And I know it wasn't good for business, and they were trying to temper that down, but
Well,
you shouldn't be
it's
so
not good for
surprised.
business again at that moment, but then, and I don't think anybody wants that. Nobody wants that headache, right? Nobody sits
Mhm.
there and says, "Hey, let's." In fact, you do things to prevent it from happening behind the scenes. Like as a promoter, I'm sure the UFC does it. In fact, I know they do. We've done it. We've learned a lot over
Mhm.
with these bad moments happening that affected us. It's like, hey, let's separate them. Let's anticipate certain things. Let's not schedule them at the same time to be in that same place or put them on the same floor of the hotel. Or in fact, let's put these guys in another hotel, right? So you start thinking
Yeah.
about, okay, we don't want it to happen. We're not doing this on purpose. But tell me where something like that happened where the promoter was upset but then they didn't turn around and use it.
That's true. Yeah, you got to use that in marketing. Like, and someone even I was talking to Damon Martin, I think, or Mike Bond, talking about this, and we were just saying like they said, I'll bet you that Conor McGregor throwing the dolly through the window is going to be used in all of the promos, and sure enough, it was used in every single promo. And that just brought more ratings. 100%
Mhm.
it brought more
How big
ratings.
was that fight?
So
How
look,
that fight was huge. It's one of the biggest
huge.
ones, if not
It's
the
the biggest
biggest,
one.
right? Yeah.
It's the biggest one at 2.5 million views, pay-per-view buys. Yeah. And even that was kind of even towards the decline of pay-per-view
Yeah.
buys. Like, people started already kind of streaming. They were probably losing, I would say, 400,000 pay-per-view buys because people were streaming at that time. So I'm not surprised it ended up being the biggest fight, but obviously the lead up to it and all the controversy with the bus and the dolly and everything, Connor flying in on a private jet, they had the whole thing to market
Yeah.
and sell it,
DC
and they did
DC
just that.
John Jones. Right. They didn't.
Yeah, the fence or the
Yeah.
weigh-ins or the face-offs when he grabbed him by the face and fell through the back of
All the
the
things
yeah.
that happened after that. I mean, that was a physical confrontation, which is what we're talking about. But when they were both still on ESPN, when the mic was still hot and they're sitting there, like the
Mhm.
things they were saying to each other, all of that came into
Yeah.
play. It was placed out there. Again, I don't think anybody wants to take that chance on doing things like that because they can go wrong and people can get hurt. And what if one of them, what if one of the fighters got hurt and then you don't have the fight anymore? So
Yeah.
you're never going to take it that far. But when you get done with it and you're like, oh man, everyone's talking about this, and we got to promote it, right?
Yeah, I mean, the DC and John, you brought up a good one. Like, I would spit in your face. I would literally kill you.
Yeah,
And you're like, oh man,
and
wow.
that's
Like, and you,
real.
yeah, 100%. Because there was no cameras on. He's like, just how you can turn it on. You can do, and DC is he does some of the best banter in the sport ever. I mean, there's Chael, there's DC, there's certain guys that just have it. They can just turn it on. But he was talking about John, how he could just turn on the fakeness right away and just be, hey, how are you? And DC called him out on it, and it just led into that conversation that they used. At every turn they could use it, they
Yeah,
used it. So that's good
yeah,
on them.
Josh.
On the David
Sorry, just
Alston,
just to
huh?
just to kind of close that thought. Like, let's face it, man, it's more fun when they don't like each other.
So I would agree with you somewhat, but then there's guys that, like, they trained together, didn't like each other, and the fights ended up being duds. That was not the case with DC and
I
John
mean, just the
Jones.
build up,
Like, the Rashad Evans and John Jones fight was kind of
but
a
when they
dud
don't
fight.
like each other, the promotion, the hype, the build up, we've seen it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just Connor, Khabib, DC, John Jones, amongst others. Obviously we've had those in Bellator, Strikeforce over the years. Um, but yeah, when the guys don't like each other and there's a lot of drama, it usually leads to more hype, but for good and for bad. So,
Yeah, I would agree. Moving into, you brought up something earlier, but moving into the CBS Paramount deal now with David Ellison kind of leading the way with Dana White and the UFC. That being said, like, that you brought up something, like you said, oh well, we had these three fights on the CBS card. Back then, it was only sometimes three, maybe four. If you had one title fight, there'd be three like fights underneath it on the main card. If you had two title fights, there would just be one fight with a possible swing bout. And do you see that kind of happening in this situation as well, or do you think that they're going to just let them have carte blanche and do what they want to do, which is what they normally do? Five fights, possibly 6 on the main
That's
card?
a really good question. Um, that's a really good question. I'm curious to see exactly, yeah, how much time they're given, because as you know from being on the production side of things, when there are commercials, it changes a lot of things. So
Yeah,
that's a really good question. I'm curious. I got a lot of. I'm excited for this UFC debut on CBS at the White House. I can't wait to see what they put together. But yeah, you can't deny, man, they've come such a long way. And don't forget, there was that moment, man, when CBS. We talked about the moment that MMA got put on timeout on CBS, and you were there for this. Remember when they brought it back with Bellator? Took a lot of things to line up, and I guess enough time had passed, and maybe some people weren't there anymore or whatever. But it led to
yeah,
that Fedor again, right on
yeah.
CBS.
Yeah, because there was talks when we got away from when Bellator got away from what was it? CBS Sports. So we went from Spike TV to Paramount to CBS Sports. There was talk of going back to just Paramount Plus, basically being on the web and or on the site, and then also or going to stay on CBS Sports. And eventually we ended up on Showtime. In that discussion though, like where did it all kind of come like the deciding factor was to go on to Showtime versus going to see or staying on CBS Sports or going to the Paramount Plus app.
Yeah, that's
What
exactly
was the factor?
what the situation was, which you just described. That's exactly what had happened. Those were the
Mhm.
options, and Scott and the executives at the network felt like that was the best place. So that's a direction
Yeah.
we went in, and then I left shortly after, just for entirely reasons of my own. But I was around
Mhm.
to launch it back on Showtime for a few more events because that was during COVID. Remember
Yeah.
we had the bubble over at Mohegan,
Yeah.
and then it was during that time, like several shows in, I just um, yeah made my move, but still stayed very close to everything. Still stayed on as a
Yeah.
consultant. Still very close with everyone, yourself included, to this day. So I kind of was hearing things and still around the business side of things at that time, but yeah, that was the move, and then that led to the return on CBS, right? And
Mhm.
it was in LA.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Bader,
At the Forum, yeah.
Fedor, Eblin, Tokov, and there was one other. I forget which the other fight was.
Yeah, off the top
Oh,
of my
was
head, I can't
it
remember.
was it Brennan Ward and Sabah Homasi?
I
Right?
think
Did
it
that
was.
open it?
That
Yeah,
was a great
yeah.
fight, by
Because you
the way.
needed
That was a great fight
because
to
that was
open
that
that.
was the formula, right? Like you needed a barn burner to open it up. You needed guaranteed fireworks, something crazy and violent, and then you moved into something very competitive and relevant for a belt, right?
Mhm.
These are some of the best guys in the world, and then you had Fedor, right, to close it out.
Mhm. So you're talking about matchmaking, you're talking about what's best for TV, you're talking about those things. And I actually wanted to get you to talk about this a little bit. You have the welterweight division right now, and just put your promoter hat on or put your matchmaking hat on, and I won't hold it against you, okay, if you don't go my way. but you've got Islam that came in and was very dominant in the welterweight division, beats JDM, wins every round. It's just a very, very dominant performance for someone coming up from 55 to 70. And now you've got Ian Gary, who has made his run. But you got JDM, who's number one now. He's ranked number one. You got Islam as the champ, and you got Ian Gary. Then you got Shavkat, who has lost. Ian Gary's lost to Shavkat, but that's been over about a year. Shavkat's been inactive. And then you've got Michael Morales, young kid, 25, 26 years old, you know, just dismantled Sean Brady in a great performance by him. And then you got Bilal Muhammad, who dropped all the way down to number 5. Then you got Carlos Pratas, number 6, and you got Sean Brady, number 7. If you were to put your promoter hat on or your matchmaker's hat on, like you take a look at Islam, there's a lot of talk right now that Kamaru Usman should be next. There's also a lot of talk that Ian Gary is the one that will sell. If you were to look at that as a promoter going into the CBS and the Paramount deal, ideally, like how would you match that up? Would you rather, let me set the stage a little bit, would you rather say, hey, Islam just destroyed JDM, who really it doesn't have a lot of wrestling. Do we want to give Islam a fighter that potentially will will battle him in the wrestling department, and we could end up seeing a stand-up fight? Or do I give him an Ian Gary, who basically is all stand-up, very little wrestling, and has shown kind of a lot of weaknesses on the ground if the fight does hit the ground? If you're looking to come onto CBS or Paramount, you're trying to make a splash. How do you match that up? Or you go with two undefeated guys. You got Shavkat, who's got the win over Ian, the undefeated guy, or do you have Michael Morales, who's young at 26 years old, who's also undefeated?
Where is Michael ranked right now? You mentioned Morales.
Michael Morales is number 4. He's right below Shavkat. Shavkat is number 3. And then Ian Gary's above Shavkat, even though he just lost to Shavkat 2
Yeah,
fights.
yeah. I think you nailed it when you said put your promoter hat on, because there's different vantage points for this conversation, right? If you're asking me, who do I think deserves it and who probably does, I would say Michael Morales is who I think
Mhm.
deserves it, but that's not always how you think as
Yeah.
a promoter, right? Right? He's undefeated. He's coming off the most dominant, impressive win, but him and Islam isn't the biggest fight. It's not,
No, it's
but
not.
right, but from a sporting perspective, and here's where I think fans get frustrated with and struggle with MMA, right? Well, and we're seeing it on many levels. It's who's most deserving doesn't always get it. There's a lot of things here to consider, and I'm glad you brought that up. As a promoter, I'm looking at this thing differently. Clearly, yeah,
Exactly. And look at and the reason and then one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to have you on today is because like I can't articulate it as well as you do. And so we have these conversations all the time. And I admire the way that you can get it across because there's so many different avenues that you have to look at this. The promoter, the matchmaker, okay, and which fighters are actually available. They all talk on the internet, but they really are injured or hurt and they can't fight. But they're still chirping because they want to be
right.
relevant. They want to keep themselves relevant. So it doesn't mean just because they're online saying I want that fight that they're really going to take it. I mean, how many times has a fighter said, "Hey, I want that fight," and the guy says online, "Yeah," and then you call him as a matchmaker, and they're like, "Oh, I'm actually injured. I
Yeah,
can't fight." It happens all
yeah,
the
yeah. There's a
time.
lot
So,
going on behind the scenes. So here are some thoughts. I kind of gave you my opinion on I think where Michael stands. I think he's the most deserving. Um,
mhm,
but then you look at, well, okay, well, who makes the biggest fight though in terms of who can promote this thing the most? I mean, he doesn't speak English, right? Then you go
yeah,
to like Ian Gary has a big following. He's got, he can hype up a fight. He speaks well. Um, and you look at Usman, that's like the legacy play, right? That's the legend
yeah,
getting the nod. Obviously, an American there, something very promotable, especially on at the White House on this platform. If that's the discussion,
mhm,
right? If that's the game we're going to play for this
yeah.
conversation. Shavkat, I love Shavkat. I've been mistaken for him in Vegas before. Always get mistaken for Asian fighters. It's funny. Yeah,
Or
yeah. Like
baseball
any Asian
players, right?
athlete, I've been called that guy. I'm not,
Well, because you're six
yeah.
three, 6'4", good-looking
Well,
Asian dude.
thank
What
you.
else are you
You're
gonna
you're you're
say?
very kind on the good looking part, but the Asian and 6'3", that's for sure. That's a fact.
Uh,
But and he trains out of Kill Cliff, so there's many reasons why I like him, but I really think the inactivity, hurts him here and not being in the spotlight, not being
mhm,
in the mix. Because again, if your job is to put on the biggest and best fights, um, yeah, I think you kind of lean more towards either Kamaru or Ian for the biggest fights, right?
mhm.
Tell me if you disagree,
Yep.
but
No, I'm in the same boat. Look, but I also look at what just happened against JDM with Islam, and I'm not trying to pitch Islam should get the Kamaru fight because Ali manages both. I'm not in that business of pitching for a manager to get what he wants, and I'm not in that business for pitching for a fighter to get what he wants. I'm in the business of saying, hey, we just watched Islam destroy JDM. He just was able to control him, did everything he wanted to do to him, okay, except finish him. Where you could potentially see something like this happen again with the Ian Gary Machado fight. I think Ian still has a little bit of work to do. That's all. And if you're going to say, "Hey, what can I do that will bring the best fight out of both guys, Islam and Kamaru?" The wrestling, I think, will potentially cancel itself out. Sure, you may get a takedown here or there, but can either fighter can they get up? And if they do get up, Will the other fighters say, hey, this is too much work? I just wasted, 2.5 minutes trying to get him down. Instead, I'm going to just keep this on the feet. And you can end up with two wrestlers becoming stand-up guys. And Kamaru Usman is shown he's got power in his hands. He knocked out Masvidal, straight shots, all of those things. As a promoter, as a matchmaker, you're like, how do I want to sell this? And my whole pitch is, I have the legacy fight. Dana White has called him the GOAT. He's considered him the best welterweight of all time. I may not
He's up
consider
there
him the
though.
best welterweight of all time, but he's up
Disagree
there.
as well, and it might just be just because we're the same age and we came from a different era, and George was just different for us. But he's up there. He's in the discussion. Yeah, it's a real
Yeah.
conversation.
No, he's definitely
Yeah.
in that discussion. But I can also take the soundbite from Dana saying, "Hey, he's the greatest welterweight of all time." Use that in my promo. Can also take the highlights of him knocking out Masvidal. I can do all these things to help promote that. With Ian Gary, I can also gather things, and he's got a great talking piece as well. But what happens once the fight happens? Like you said, it's the tune-in value as well. And Gary gets out there, and if he gets taken down and controlled, or he runs the whole time and nothing really happens, he sticks and moves a little bit. You've lost fans as well on your first couple shows on CBS or Paramount. That's kind of my promoter hat is like, okay, I don't want to have Ian Gary running around trying to avoid the takedown so much that I end up losing people when we just started on this
Yeah, look,
network.
really great point. I'm actually I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm a little impressed. I will give you credit, and here's where you break things down. We already had the conversation about marketability, promotability, right? We had that conversation. We're going with the
Mm-hmm.
English speaking
Yeah.
guys that are. I know Ian's not American, but we've seen some Irishmen, become pretty famous in the sport, right?
Yeah.
So they've got that. So we've addressed that from a promotability, marketability standpoint, and now we're getting into matchups, right? Stylistic
Mm-hmm.
breakdown. And I agree with you. That's where you look at, well, okay, we've talked about who could be in the biggest fights and make this bigger and promote it. Now let's talk about what's going to make the most exciting fight or a good fight, as opposed to, as you
Mm-hmm.
said, another 5 round, you know, uh, fight where it's all about control and ground positioning. And again, the
Mm-hmm.
casual audience. That's not how you grow the sport, right? I think everyone can agree. You
No.
you grow the sport and you maximize opportunities with big, exciting fights. And yeah, that's where I agree with you. God, it's painful to say that sometimes. You're right. Stylistically, Kamaru can obviously wrestle very well, and I think that would probably lead to a more exciting matchup where Islam wouldn't be able to just dominate
Yeah.
him in the grappling department like that. And I'm sure this is making Ali happy hearing all this.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah,
But look, you also have Shavkat who's in the mix. And like I would agree with you as well. I think that Morales but is probably the most deserving, to be honest, after what he did to Sean Brady. That being said, as a promoter and as a matchmaker, he's 26 years old. What's the rush to get him? That's
sure.
where I hold him back a little bit. Let me get one more fight. Maybe we give him the Pratis fight. Maybe I give him the Bilal Muhammad fight. I need one more fight in there, right? I probably wouldn't give him Bilal because Bilal's coming off 2 losses. I want to kind of keep Bilal in there because he is a former champion. But I would match him maybe with Pratis, and give him some more time to mature at 26. I've got if I play my cards right, I can have him for as a champion maybe or somewhere in that mix for the next 7-8 years. But if I don't, and something bad happens in this first title fight, he may never be the same fighter because fighters can have a tendency to on the build up do really well. And as soon as they lose to someone for a title, like, oh, I lost my chance, some of them never recover. They never make it back to that platform. And so I would like to slow play him. If I was a matchmaker, I would slow play him maybe one more fight because he's deserving. There's no doubt he's deserving. Shavkat is 31 years old. He's in the peak and the prime of himself. You've got to let him fight. You've got to get him active. You got to get him busy. He's 19-0, I believe. He's got like 17 first round finishes or something along those lines. The argument could be made that he could jump him, but I agree with you on he just hasn't been active enough. So I'm in that mix of Michael Morales holding him back, Ian Gary being there, but I put Usman there to open up the network on CBS and Paramount based on just the legacy play, the PR system that the UFC has. They do a great job. They can sell ice to an Eskimo. You understand? That whole bit. It's true. They can market the heck out of that. And do I think Ian Gary is deserving? He is deserving. But if I'm walking into the new CBS Paramount deal, I'm putting legacy over that right now. Ian Gary's still young. I've got plenty of time to work with Ian Gary and build him up and
Sure.
eventually get him
Sure.
big
Look,
time.
I think they're in a good situation overall. It's a fantastic division. There's a lot of hype around it. There's a lot of these conversations going on. Fans are excited. That's the most important thing for them. Yeah, you could go into a um, legends type fight, right? The current pound for
Mm-hmm.
pound best fighter in the world against the best ever in that division. Yeah, you
Mm-hmm.
could. That's easy to promote. That's easy for everyone to understand. Not everyone's going to be happy about it again, but I do
Right.
agree that Morales is, he's young and he's got time, but I just go back to, if we're going off who had the most recent impressive performance, man, that was dominant. That was mind blowing. That was very impressive
Yep.
because Ian Gary's fight against Bilal, not the most impressive. Got the job done,
No.
right? But you're not looking at that like, man, that's outstanding. That's an A plus, right? You passed with flying colors.
Yeah.
That's hey, tough win, gritty. You are getting better. You're there. Um, Pratis obviously had a great, I mean, he beat a former champ in exciting fashion, but
Mm-hmm.
um, I just felt like he had a couple prior because he lost to Ian, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he lost
Yeah,
to Ian. Yeah, but in that fight, I believe in the 5th round, he had Ian running around on his hands and knees trying to get
sure.
away from him. Like he was struggling in that 5th round. He slowed down and got tired. And I look at Ian Gary and his performance, and I think to myself, like, he was very hittable by Bilal. Bilal was able
Sure.
to touch him, was able to. Bilal's not a tall guy, not a long guy, but he was getting hit with some good shots. Nothing that really would rock him and knock him out, but I hold I'm where you're at. Is the person who had the best performance though that night against the number 2 guy in the world at the time was Sean Brady. It would be
Yeah, it
Michael
was so
Morales.
dominant, man, and he just made it look way too easy. And I remember um, when we saw them in the cage together, it was just like, oh damn, this is Sean in the
Yeah,
right weight class? Made me think like, brother, and I really like him. He's a great fighter. I'm like, man, you're a lightweight, and he probably said that after the
yeah.
fight too. I don't know if he said anything publicly since then, but after a fight like that, you got to be thinking like, man. Um,
There was a moment in that fight where I thought that it was just the
yeah,
camera angle. Like sometimes the fighter closest to you looks a lot bigger than the other fighter, and then they switched, and I was like, "Oh wow, you're still small. Like you're still smaller, and you're the." It was very strange to me. I was like, "Man, Sean Brady looks tiny compared to
yeah.
Michael
So
Morales.
I guess we're in
Absolutely tiny."
agreement here again. Oh, hate it when that happens, but here we are. I got to be honest. We're in agreement. He had the most impressive performance, but he might not be. It certainly won't be the biggest fight. Shavkat in the mix, but that layoff, goes against
Yeah.
him, and then we get down to it's yeah. The more I think about it with you here, and we're having this conversation, the more I feel like it points to Kamaru. You have and I know the fans are bummed because they just saw some really great performances, but man, you really got to consider it from the total perspective. And again, thinking about this from a promotional standpoint, right? Which is, I'm glad you brought
Right.
that up. This is combat sports, guys. This isn't, this is, what was the example I used with you the other day, right? When we were talking about this over the phone, I said, fans expect certain things like, if you win, if the top team from the AFC gets through the playoffs and the top team from the NFC gets through the playoffs, they're going to end up in the Super Bowl. It doesn't always
Yeah.
work that way in fighting. It does
No,
not.
it
It does
doesn't.
not. Yeah.
They're expecting a clean cut road, and it doesn't work that way. Like there's injuries involved. There's fighters that just are holding out. I mean, we saw that with the John Jones situation, right? He held out, and decided that he didn't wanted to retire versus fight Tom Aspinall. It happens all the time. The sad part is that fighters have a not fighters, fans have a tendency to say like, "Oh, it's BS. It's the UFC's fault." A lot of it sometimes falls back on whether it's manager, whether it's fighter, whatever it is. It sometimes falls back on them as well, not just the promotion.
How's it the UFC's
And
fault in that
back in the
situation, right? I just don't see
yeah,
it. They
yeah,
obviously. stepped up and were willing to pay what he wanted. They gave him every opportunity. They didn't strip him like they probably would have stripped anyone else a little sooner. They were, it's probably tough for them, right? They were honoring his legacy as the GOAT, and it's
Yeah.
just crazy. This is Dana always says it, right? It's the fight game.
That's another thing. Like, I think a lot of the fans are holding it against Dana and the UFC, and all they're really doing is honoring kind of Kamaru Usman's legacy in the sport. Like, hey, this is kind of your last ditch effort. We'll give you this shot, and you may ride off into the sunset, or maybe you'll go to 185 and try to challenge against Chimaev, because he is a big welterweight. He physically holds a lot of muscle, and he's one of the most talented guys that has ever stepped foot inside the cage. I just think that fans have a tendency to harp too much on the fact that, like, hey, these guys have done a lot to get to where they were at. He defended the title 4 or 5 times, I think 5 times. And the UFC is almost like, hey, I'm going to do you a solid. I'm going to give you this shot against Islam. You have a good win over Buckley. You got that win. You did us a favor also when you stepped up and fought Chimaev on a couple days' notice. And to be honest, I mean, if people were talking after that fight, had it been a 5-round fight, he maybe would have won. You never know. And so I think that plays a lot into the UFC. They don't. A lot of fighters will sometimes complain that, oh, they didn't do me a favor, but they remember things like this. They do. They're pretty good about, like, hey, if I need you to step up and fight, they'll take care of you a little bit. They'll give you a fight maybe later on that maybe you would have had to fight 2 or 3 more fights for. But this is a solid to a former champion that I think is also stylistically the hardest matchup for Islam Makhachev
Yeah,
right now.
yeah, you're right, and I can tell you from experience, as far as addressing the things you said about, guys don't get what they want all the time, and promises are made, and sometimes they're broken, and this is just a tough business, man. I mean, after being in it for so long, we didn't always make everybody happy. Things happen, timing,
Yeah.
like you said, there's a lot to consider. Everything we talked about, there's levels and layers to this thing. It's a lot more complicated than, oh, this guy deserves it. Sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you really need to sit and talk and think about these things. Think about, you nailed it. This is CBS. This is the White House. Now it's going to be big no matter what. You and I have also said that. Let's say they go with Michael Morales. I'm just saying it's going to be big regardless. Now, as you also said, though, and I'll point out, God, I'm giving you so much credit this show. It's what happens after, right? It's and look, it'll still be big. People are going to be watching the UFC for many, many years to come, and we're going to be tuned into every event, even the ones that you and I are maybe not so intrigued about. We're still talking about it, right? So, but that's something people got to consider, is the moment. What is the moment, right? From first time in New York at MSG, what do you put there, to first time and maybe the only time ever at the White House, first time on CBS, that's for sure, right? You only have one first. And those are the things you really have to consider. But I think fans have a hard time. You've been in the business for so long on many levels, you understand it. You've been rewarded and you've been punished for various things, right? Like you've gotten the short end and you've gotten hooked up, and so you know how things can play out in this business. But I think the average fan just sits there and just is upset and fired up, and just doesn't want to acknowledge it.
What I've said is that, like, fights, like if you throw Conor on the White House card, right? You don't need to, because I've heard a lot of people talking about you need to have, this fight and this fight. Let's have 3 title fights. Let's have 4. And I'm like, it's not going to work that way. You put Conor McGregor on there, I don't need to have 4 title fights. I don't need to have 2 more title fights. Look, you fill the top of the card with the person who draws the most. That's normally how it goes. Give me the best fighter I can put right now that draws the most, and then I'll trickle it down to the bottom and, like, hey, who are my next 2 or 3 biggest stars that that will pull in people, but are not going to break the bank. And ultimately, that's what this comes down to. The White House card is going to be something that they spend a lot of money on. Okay, but they also have to make sure that they're making the network happy. This is a huge deal for CBS. It's a huge deal for the White House. Even bigger deal for the promotion as well as the fighters. But if you put Conor at the top, whether it's Michael Chandler or anybody else, and then whoever you have below it, don't expect it to be a John Jones and an Alex. Don't expect it to be, you're going to have 2 good fights at the top and probably 2 good fights on the below that. I can't imagine them doing a 5 or 6 fight card, main card. And everything that I've heard also is that it's only going to be 6 fights, period. There won't be any prelims. There won't be 14 fights. Just doesn't make it cost effective with security and, and Secret Service and everyone trying to protect the area for that amount of time. I think it's just too much commotion going on, and it puts a lot of people, I think, it freaks out a lot of people. So ultimately, I see that whole thing going. Would you say that's correct though? Is that fighters that once you put like someone like a Connor at the top, you're budgeting the rest of your fighters the rest of the way down just to keep your budget and under control. And everyone's like, oh, they have billions of dollars. No. Each show is
It's a
its own
business.
its
It's
own
a
thing.
business, and those businesses that run well, and clearly they are one of those. Yeah, they're conscious of it. Budget is always in play. Just because they're making good money doesn't mean you just spend. And I think Dana's acknowledged that, right, publicly, about the budget and everything it's going to take to put this thing on. I've also heard him say they'll only have like 4,000 people in attendance. It's a private event. They still don't know how they're going to vet who gets in there and who qualifies to be in there. So yeah, this thing, there's still a lot of questions. And to me, that's kind of what makes it's like so mysterious and intriguing. It'll be the most interesting fight, event ever in the history of the sport, right?
I mean, I can't. The only other fight I can really think that was so intrigued, people were intrigued by, was when we did the Playboy
Yeah.
Mansion. Because that only sat what 1,000, 1,200 people, I think, at the most is what it sat. When we did the Strikeforce Playboy Mansion, I fought on that card twice. Thank you, by the way, and making sure I was on that card, which kind of sucked because I actually did get a chance to enjoy it, but it was still fun to fight. And I was always either the co-main or the main, like around that top portion. So we had to be out of there by 12:30, I believe, was the latest, and we didn't get done with fights until like 11:30. I got like an hour to hang out.
Yeah,
But it was cool.
that was
I still got the
before my
opportunity.
time at Strikeforce, but I heard a lot of stories from the crew on many
awesome.
different levels, and that was the event. One of them, you wore that shirt about Frank, right? Wasn't that? Oh, that was a different one.
The one in San
Okay.
that was a different event. That was
All
in
right.
San Jose. Yeah, that was in San
All right.
Jose. Yeah, the commission got me they dinged me for that. I think I got like a $5,000 fine for that. It was horrible. And that was before I renegotiated my contract, so I didn't have a lot of money at the time. But look, I'm gonna have you change out of your promoter hat, put your manager's hat on. How difficult is it when you have 2 fighters that you manage, and that you're like, hey, like, yeah, sure, it'd be great to have them fight, and I can make double the money, but it has a tendency sometimes to kind of stir the pot a little bit, can kind of make things a little bit difficult and ugly between the fighters as well as the manager. I mean, managers don't seem like they want this to happen.
Yeah, no, look, I haven't been doing it for very long, and I still don't do it. Like, it's not something I do full time. I got other things that I'm focused on, and obviously Alta MMA Inc. is my priority, and I work with guys that I like to work with, and just I'm able to pick and choose, fortunately, because it's not my main gig. But to answer your question, I don't think it's ideal. There have been moments where I've dealt with it from a consultant advisor standpoint, but also have heard and had to deal with it from a. So I'll put the promoter hat back on, but just for a second, because you hear these things, right? There's this, you hear the rumblings of oh, this matchup. Have you heard so and so's with so and so? Because you're talking. If I was part of helping set it up, right? So you're talking to the same guy to put the fight together, and then during that conversation, it comes up like, well, how you gonna? Whose side are you on, right? Like, how's this going to work? And of course, the answer is always the guy who makes the most money. But you're right. I think for those managers and agencies that have a lot of guys, and this is happening, I do think, it's not ideal. I do think there's certain guys who just, man, they really don't like it. I'm sure you can speak to this, and for them, it's almost like you need to make a choice. Like, I don't like it, and it does put people's relationships. It might test it. I do come to find though that might be something that happens. That it's a bigger deal more for the younger guys. Because I think when it comes down to it, like the fight we were talking about, Islam and Kamaru, I'm sure both guys would be fine that they have the same manager. They're both veterans, right? So in a case like that, it's not a big deal. but clearly it's a big deal. I've heard of fighters leaving a manager or an agency because for that reason. Like, man, they
Mhm.
fought another one of his guys or our guys, whatever, however you describe it, and just didn't feel like they had my back, like they were with the other guy. Or you're just waiting to see, I'm
Mm.
going to pick and choose who wins, and that's going to be my new favorite, and I'm going to bail on the guy who
Yeah.
loses. So yeah, I don't work with enough guys. Again, it's not what I'm
Yeah.
focused on at the moment, but it has happened, and you have to have the conversation. You have to be upfront and honest. Some guys will know, and other guys you have to tell them, like, hey, just so you know, that's my guy as well. So how do you feel about it? How do you, I've even heard about this from a training standpoint, guys out of the same gym, right? And the
Yeah.
rift
They don't
it'll
they don't want to
right,
be together.
and the rift it'll cause there, right? Like things, it's happened before, rarely, but then sometimes things never go back to the way they were. It's kind of
Yeah.
different.
I've had a relationship with, I at the time that I was kind of making my run the second time after the Nate fight, there was that talk of like, hey, you're going to fight for the title next. I had the Pettis fight lined up, but I also had Gray Maynard at the gym with me. I had Tyson Griffin with the gym with me. Habib had already showed up. He was already there. So we had these guys that were there. Habib hadn't quite started making his run yet, but then Gray was ranked ahead of me. I think he was number 1 or number 2. He was supposed to fight Grant Neal. Is it Neil Grant? Anyways, one of those guys, and he ended up never fighting again after he got a concussion in one of the fights. But Gray was supposed to fight. Then Gray fought Nate, lost to him, and then that fight went away. And then I was supposed to fight Pettis. But as a matchmaker, how hard is it to have that conversation with going, hey, I know you manage these two guys. Like we're gonna have to try to line them up. I mean,
Well, I'll be honest, we're a little less sympathetic. It's not my it's not
not
my
your
problem.
concern. That,
This is what we want. This is what No,
it's
I'm
true.
serious. Like, that's not my problem. That's your problem. Now, it's easy to say that, but it eventually becomes your problem
Yeah.
because you're having a hard time putting it together. Whether it's obviously a lot harder when it's the same training partner, when they are training
Yeah.
partners and from the same gym, that's way harder. But the management stuff, it I think for the most part, like I said, when you get to veterans, uh, I don't think it's as big of a deal. I think it's a bigger deal when they're younger.
Mhm. Yeah, I look at it too. Like, look, Ali he's been able to do this before, like the Habib and Justin
Yep.
Gaethje fight. I think he managed Gilbert Burns as well as Kamaru Usman
Hmm.
when they fought. I believe that was the case. And then you've got other fight. I feel like it can happen, and I think that's kind of the relationship that as a manager you have to have with the UFC and any promotion is that hey, I manage a group of guys that are all very talented. Eventually, some of them may have to fight each other, and I I would imagine Ali's had this conversation with them, and I've talked to other managers. Like, look, I have the conversation. My manager Bob Cook, he tried to avoid Mike Swick, Koscheck, and John Fitch all fighting each other, and we actually didn't sign and didn't have Anthony Rumble Johnson come to AKA because he's like, I already have enough 70
Yeah.
pounders, which was a huge mistake, by the way,
Yeah.
huge mistake. But it was that conversation of like, look, I can't avoid having them fight. I'm trying to keep them from fighting, but eventually when they get to the bottleneck of 2, 3, 4 in that top ranking, they're gonna have to fight. Koss and Fitch avoided fighting each other to the longest time, and they basically said, no, we're not doing it. We're not doing it, and that ruffled some feathers with the
Yeah.
UFC.
Again, that attitude and that mindset, that's not my problem. I need to put on big fights
Mm-hmm.
and the best fights. So you guys need to
Yeah.
figure that out.
I would agree with you though that the younger guys will have more of a problem with it because they feel like the manager's not really looking out for them. You've been with that guy longer; he's got a
That's
bigger
right.
name, and now you're just going to use me. And the younger guys will have a more of a problem with it. Whereas the older guys are like, "I'm on my way out, kind of, or not really on my way out, but I'm older. I've dealt with this long enough. I put in all my work. I know what I'm doing, and I'll go ahead and fight
Right.
whoever it is, as long as it doesn't ruin the friendship or the relationship. I think is what it
Right.
is.
And I think to
With
add
that.
to that, I think you also have had a longer relationship with your manager. You know what I mean? Like, you've been with them
Yeah,
long enough where like,
yeah,
yeah, this
yeah,
guy's got my back. He's been with
yeah.
me.
Yeah, I mean, I was with Bob Cook the whole time from 1997, 98 until, yeah,
Right.
all the way
So
until I
I
was
think
done.
that the relationships have just existed longer versus these newer ones where you're still kind of in that period of, hey, I'm starting to get to know this guy. We're building towards that, and then to early on have that challenge. And like, some guys probably don't even care. Some guys are like, well, does it affect how much I'm getting paid? Like, no, okay. then I'm going to go beat him up. Sorry, I'm beat up your other guy. And I think some guys, though, I'm starting to hear more and more. Yeah, it seems like the chatter is more with the younger guys, like the vets. We just listed so
Yeah.
many examples. I think we could probably go and find more, but the vets are, I think they're just focused on winning, and they're not as worried about that. Now the manager's going to have their hands full. They got to balance it out on their side. That's their problem. But then again, they're in a good situation having the winner no matter what, right?
Yeah. I'm going to get you out of here on this. Last thing, there's a little nostalgia going on. You got Ronda Rousey back in the gym training, talking about a return. I know there's a little hint that she's talking about fighting boxing and Katie Taylor. I personally don't think that's a good fight, but I'm not here to judge. Simply put, Ronda Rousey, and then also too, Gina Carano posted videos of herself hitting the bag, hitting mitts, working with her coach. She looks like she's getting herself back in shape and getting ready to do something. How great would it be to see, or do you even feel that way? To see if they could match that fight up between Gina and Ronda Rousey in a boxing match, an MMA fight, whatever, kickboxing match, whatever it is. I mean, how do you feel? How do you feel about something like that? Because you promoted both of them. You were matchmaking and
Yeah, yeah.
promoted, helping to
With
promote both of them
Ronda, it was really
females.
towards the end there. We just kind of missed each other. With Gina, was there for a good amount of time. Got to know her and her family. Big
Mm-hmm.
fans of the Carano family. I love the idea. I think it's great, and I know there are fans out there that don't care to see these older fighters and these legends come back, but I like it. I would watch.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather see that than Ronda and Katie Taylor. I'll tell you that much. I think Ronda and Gina is a perfect
Yeah.
fight. I would rather see it in MMA, but hey, I'd watch it if it was boxing as well. I'm a fan. I think it'll be great. Some people, as I said, are not fans of it. I just don't see how it hurts the sport at all. Like I think we're way past
Yeah.
that.
I think we are as well. I mean, Jake Paul's making millions and millions of
Yeah.
dollars. He's done. Like, come on, man. He was about to fight Gervonta Taylor.
Yeah.
Let's just call it what it is. He stepped up now. He's fighting a big time fight. But
Hey, we can't say anything now.
nope.
Hey, all everyone is saying and should be saying is, all right. I guess we can't
Yeah.
criticize you for your opponent selection anymore. He just said, I'll show you guys. So
Yeah. I mean, look, he's got some cojones, man. He's got some levels. I gotta tell you, that's pretty impressive. Especially if he gets himself into that. If he gets inside that ring, I'd be like,
look,
oh. I did want to say,
just
go ahead.
one note on that. I think anytime you step up and you're in that situation and you go straight to the top, you're in a win-win situation in many ways. Like, let's say he survives 2 rounds, right? I can't tell. I
Yeah,
mean, he did better than Francis already at that point, right? If he survives two
yeah,
rounds, and then he can hang his
absolutely.
hat on that, and then that'll be the conversation. So, um, yeah, I think it's very hard to criticize a fighter for taking the biggest challenge, even if it's a massive bite like that. You and I know the real guys, the real ones. We don't, people in this industry, in this game, where we just, it's a nod of respect, and not, it's kind of, you're crazy, but
Yeah.
like we said, I can't say anything bad, man. Good luck.
No, when we were young, do you remember when people were like, "Oh, would you get in the ring with Mike Tyson for 1 round for $1 million?" Well, this dude's getting in the ring. It's for a lot more than $1 million, but he's getting in there with the newer version of a Mike Tyson, who's physically a lot more like, just a lot more. And what's the word I'm looking for? Just a lot bigger of a fighter than Mike Tyson ever was. I mean, Anthony Joshua is
Yeah.
enormous. I mean, Jake Paul came up to
And
like
he's a
his
big dude
chest. He was
too.
looking at his
He's a
chest.
big guy,
He is.
right?
And so I tip my hat to him. I've given him all the credit he deserves. I bragged on him a lot for the past fights, but I've got to keep my mouth shut. If I'm actually not keeping my mouth shut, I'm actually praising him for taking this fight. It's huge. It's ill-advised, but it
Yeah.
is huge. And I said, look, let's just imagine if he survives 3 or 4 or 5 rounds, whatever it is. Like you said, that's better than Francis. But then on top of it, what happens if he ends up doing like a Francis and Tyson Fury situation where he drops Anthony Joshua? I mean, you're talking. He's writing his ticket to anything else he wants to
Yeah.
do in life. He's already worth millions,
Yeah.
right? He's already got a pretty good big piggy bank. He's done a great job promoting himself. But I'm just, if he's able to sit Anthony Joshua down or rock him or make him take steps back, everyone's going to
Oh
go
yeah,
nuts. It's
yeah.
going to go
It
crazy.
will
It's going to be
be.
huge.
Yeah, it would be mind blowing. No one's expecting it. We're all expecting. Well, common sense would lead you to believe in everything we've seen that it's going to be ugly and early. But man,
Mhm.
we never know. But it's also going to be fun. I think that's something that fans kind of struggle with sometimes. Is just man, just have fun. Going back to the Gina Ronda, why not?
Mhm.
That's fun. Let's have
Yeah.
fun. Let's enjoy it.
I did there. That's what's kind of getting me a little bit is that tons of fighters and someone you've dealt with as well, and I've had a little back and forth with her on is Chris Cyborg, and she's very much against this fight happening, whether it's Katie Taylor or Ronda just coming back. Period. And I've had Mike Bond on, I've had Damon Martin on, I've had like, and the consensus from the media is like, oh well, she just spent all this time Ronda has talking about she's suffered concussions, she's fallen down, and all of these things. But you brought up a very good point to me the other day when we were in conversation about how, look, the media, not the media, but the commissions are put there for a reason to protect the fighters. Because that was Chris Cyborg's argument. Well, the commission's supposed to be protecting her. She just wrote a book about how she had all these things, these issues with concussions. People write books all the time to sell books. And whether it's true or not, she could say, I'm just in character. She could say that. Okay, there's that. But then on top of it, commissions also go out there and they do, especially after you're the age of 36, your medical research or your medicals you have to pass are a lot more extensive. I mean, when I was fighting after 36, I had to get the EKG, the E whatever, and all these other things that attached to my head. I went through a thorough medical inspection for every fight after I turned 36. Ronda's going to have to go through that same exact thing, especially after 9 years off. I don't understand the criticism on this situation of like, hey, if she passes the medicals, like you said, what's the holdup? The commission did their job. The doctor's supposed to do their job. And Ronda is just her job is just to train, get herself in the best shape, and fight. Why are people speaking out against this?
I think they probably just don't have that perspective. They haven't had a chance to listen to us yet and hear all the knowledge we're spitting out, on this episode. But that's it. Is guys, it's evaluated on a few levels. First, you have to become eligible to fight, which is getting your license. Right? You need to get licensed, which means you need to pass all your medicals, submit all your paperwork, and put yourself in a position to fight. That's number one. And as you said, if her MRI or if they want her to do extensive, testing to show that her brain's healthy, if that says she's clean and good to go, they're going to have a hard time denying her getting a license. Now, again, the matchup that's the other conversation, right? So you have to clear that first. Get
Mm-hmm.
licensed, prove you're healthy, and again, if she is, because you brought up concussions that were referenced in her book, things she's talked about,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps. Um, and I'm sure those are concerns. People are bringing that to any commission's attention. But the answer to that is medical testing. That's the end all be all. You and I are not doctors. The guys who run commissions, the executive officers aren't even doctors. They rely on doctors. We all rely on those guys. And even a doctor can't just look at her and say, "Oh yeah, her brain's not in good health." He doesn't know. We got to go take a look. So go take a look. If it's there, if it's healthy, if she passes, grant her a license, and then talk about the matchup. If it's Katie Taylor in boxing, talk about that matchup. If it's Gina Carano in boxing or MMA, I think that's an easier conversation to have. But that's how I look at it as, again, somebody who's been on this side of the business for a very long time. Is I'm like, oh yeah, that's I don't see the same issue. I think people just don't like seeing the older guys come back, male or female. It seems to be
Yeah.
the case. Like sometimes I think they think it's sad. You know what I right? Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Like, oh, here we go, man. This is so sad. Like, I don't know. They seem to be pretty into it. Maybe it is. Maybe they need the money. I don't know. But if they want to do it, and there's somebody willing to promote, and they're healthy enough to do it. See, that's the key, Josh. That's where I think there's the difference
Yeah.
is because some of these guys are not healthy enough to do it, and they're still being trotted out there. That's where I feel bad.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I
Yeah.
stand on it.
I find that MMA athletes, they want to scratch the itch no matter what afterwards, whether it's wrestling, like this new wrestling that's going out. I think this is amazing. It gives them a chance to scratch the itch in terms of competitiveness. It could be anything, karate combat. It could be, other things. And they want to do something that's active jiu-jitsu tournaments. Benson Henderson used to do jiu-jitsu tournaments all the time when he was champion and even after he was champion. They're competitive all the way around. They have to be competitive to train boxing, kickboxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu. They learn so many things that they're not just stuck to playing basketball, right? They're athletes in many different martial arts. And so they want to scratch that itch. And it's a combat itch that they want to scratch. And you can't get that out unless you're being competitive against one-on-one. And so I'm happy for her if she wants to do it. Like you said, if she passes the medicals, I'm all for it. I'm all for watching her and Gina. I'm not so much on the Katie Taylor situation, but onto that situation. I'd love to see that fight, or like a Marloes Conan. Like you get the older females to come out and start and to fight. I think I'd love to see that fight. So, hey man, I want to thank you so much for joining me, and it's been great. I know we talk all the time, but I wanted to get other people involved into some of our conversations. They'll get a chance to hear this, and I'm glad that you agreed that I was right so much today.
Oh,
It was like vinegar coming out of your mouth having to say
yeah,
that.
no, this was a tough one. We got through it. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you, buddy. Thanks, man.